John Gilroy here. Simon Sinek says start with why. Today, we ask the question, why does AI matter for federal agencies? Hit the music, Manny.
Welcome to the Federal Tech Podcast, where industry leaders share insights on innovation with a focus on reducing cost and improving security for federal technology. If you like the Federal Tech Podcast, please support us by giving us a rating and review on Apple Podcast.
Welcome to the Federal Tech Podcast, a podcast that's going to you to federal technology leaders. My name is John Gilroy, and I will be your moderator. Today, we're going to look at artificial intelligence from 30,000 feet. I mean, after all, our guest today just got back from a flight to Brazil, so he should have a pretty good idea about looking things from high above and looking down at federal agencies. Our guest is Dr. Raj Iyer. Iyer. He is the head of public sector at ServiceNow. I think many of our listeners may know Raj's background, been involved in this industry for 30 years, spent a lot of time at the Army as a first CIO, and he has a very good perspective on this whole idea of AI and applying it to solving federal problems. So, Raj, we're not going to do any dilly-dallying here. We should jump right into it. So, give me a quick overview. How can a federal agency apply artificial intelligence to help them reduce cost, increase efficiency, maybe even reach their goals?
John, thanks for having me on the show. It's a real pleasure to be back. And to our audience here, let's cut to the chase. AI isn't new. It's been around for a while. I think what is new, though, is the supercharge we're getting through generative AI. And that truly is the game changer. So when you look at generative AI and how fast that's evolving and maturing as a technology, its rapid adoption in the consumer world, and the excitement that we're seeing in the public sector, it's very clear that we're past the hype cycle on generative AI. And there's reasons for this. And I can go back to some of the basic things that governments do in terms of delivering citizen services, right? So for example, here's a key data point that I found just last week. It turns out there's about $140 billion worth of benefits that go untapped by citizens here in the United States every year. Just think about that. One of the key reasons governments exist is to help the most needy, and help them with subsidies, help them with benefits, whether it's unemployment benefits, nutritional assistance, healthcare, whatever it might be. And the government's leaving $140 billion on the table, not being leveraged by citizens. And when you read that White House report that goes with it, one of the things that they call out is how hard it is for citizens to navigate the bureaucracy of government when it comes to receiving such services. And we've all been through this. We know that, right? I mean, do we go to a government agency, like we go to the mall to shop for something? No, we don't, right? We rely on government at times of need when we're going through some of the worst things in our lives. Could be a health situation, could be, losing a job, could be losing a family member. And yet, when you look at those moments that matter in the lives of citizens, the services and how painful it is to actually receive those services from governments today is a long way from where it needs to be in an ideal state. And so this is really, just from one perspective, if you look at, what governments do and where generative AI can come in and make a huge change. It's now about, turning on AI, not just to be able to provide and interact with citizens in a conversational way, but think about the value that this can bring by being anticipatory, right? Which means, if you had something bad happen to you, to your family or yourself, and the government is able to know and anticipate your need, governments can now bring the entire collective power of the government to benefit you and your family in a truly unified way that we've never seen before. And that really is just one of those powerful use cases for generative AI.
I went to your LinkedIn profile and I noticed one of your updates was you were in Brazil and talking about how the Brazilian government is using ServiceNow to help improve services to their citizens as well. So this isn't just the United States. So actually your company's helping companies all over the world, include the federal government, and just helping people. Yeah.
Yeah, this is global, John. I mean, this is exactly, what keeps me going every single day is because when I look at the use cases around the world, when I look at the common challenges and the opportunities that public sector customers of ours have around the world, there's a common thread. And that common thread is exactly what we're trying to do through our global public sector business here at ServiceNow is, rather than taking a bespoke approach, custom implementations, high customizations in core mission systems. These are the things of, the bad old days of IT. What we're telling and advising our most strategic customers is there's a new way to do this. And the new way to do this is the often hyped term digital transformation. But what does that really mean, right? What does digital transformation really mean? It really means in this context for public sector, it's putting data in the hands of consumers, right? And treating that consumer experience, that citizen experience, just like how they would be treated as consumers in the consumer marketplace. And that is now an expectation in every country around the world that I go to. It's very clear that whether it's, a Gen Z workforce or whether it's even aging populations, the level of understanding and the adoption of technology as a key source and the venue through which citizens are seeking services from governments is now just very common. It's not a nice to have, it's an imperative for governments. And this is where we see the digital divide that continues to grow. And governments are now saying, it's like, gosh, if we relied and do an IT the same old way that we've done in the past, we're not going to be able to deliver these expectations to our citizens in a timely manner, especially with growing deficits all around the world. So there's no money to do it either. So you're going to have to be fast. You have to be agile. You have to be responsive to your citizens, and you have to do it with the budget you have.
Well, I'm glad you brought up the term billions. You talked about 140 billion. I'm going to reduce that and go down to just 6 billion. And here's a fun fact for you. I've been out to Long Beach a couple times in LA, and this is an incredible number. 6 billion containers a year go through Long Beach. There's only like 600 agents out there to juggle all that stuff. I mean, so you and me are out there with our little clipboards and a piece of paper. I mean, how many hours a day? I mean, how else can you handle it unless you get a bigger, gonna need a bigger boat, gonna need a bigger tool.
And John, we see this in every industry, right? In government. Now, I always tell people in public sector is an industry of industries, right? Like, you're in manufacturing or you're in telco or you're in oil and gas. Those are very specialized. They do one thing, and you go around the world and you talk to any oil and gas company, they do the same thing. But governments and the mission of governments is very vast. It's complex, driven by a lot of regulations and policies, a lot of politics, driven by very, very bureaucratic budgeting cycles, procurement processes. And that's where the complexity comes in. And those are typically the obstacles to doing digital transformation. And this is where, you really have to break through those barriers. So, for example, sustainable infrastructure and transportation is one of our key priorities that we're building solutions on the ServiceNow platform to enable exactly those kinds of use cases. And we're working with some of the largest customers in the world, like the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and their brand new city, Neom, in the desert, is all built on the ServiceNow platform. And what we're doing there is trying to integrate Internet of Things and the sensor data and get to proactive services, being able to use AI and generative AI to really automate so many of those processes, because not only is it harder and harder for governments to hire and retain people, but the volume of data that is now coming into governments and the speed at which they need to process that is just not capable of being done by humans in a fast and scalable way. And so this is where the power of AI and generative AI is real. And the more digital and automation solutions that we can bring to the mission space of governments, which is what I'm focused on here at ServiceNow, it's absolutely a game changer.
So Raj, you've been here and there, been to the rodeo a few times. So if, let's say, a federal technology leader is listening to this podcast, maybe wants to have 2 or 3 takeaways from this. They're out running or they're lifting weights or they're listening to this where they're walking their dog, and they want to have like 2 or 3 maybe walkaways from this. So what kind of maybe tips or suggestions can you share with our audience on how to use this generative AI to be successful?
Hey, so first I would say is you don't want to be left behind. Like I said, this is not one of those things that's just gonna, you think will just gonna go away in a couple of years. Yeah, we said that about virtual reality and augmented reality. Yes, we said that about the metaverse, but I am telling you, this thing is real. And so you do not want to be left behind. So I think for senior IT leaders in government, you can either take the bite and jump in, right? Or be left behind. And left behind, I don't think is an option for government. So in terms of jumping in, I would say, start with your people. And this is very clear, and we said this with digital transformation as well. The one big thing that you're going to have to do in government with these new technologies is you're going to have to upskill your organic workforce. So take this opportunity now to get your staff and your employees trained up and educated on what generative AI is, and start to identify those use cases. This was in the executive order that came out from the White House recently, right? Every agency is now being tasked to come up with those, most impactful, use cases for Gen AI. Don't shy away from it. And I'll tell you the best way to do that. The best way to do that is go spend, a day where real work happens in government, right? Don't lock yourself in your office. Go to the floor, walk the floor, talk to your people, and ask them about all of the pain points they go through every single day. So this kind of day in the life of approach is probably one of the best ways to identify where you have bottlenecks in how you run your business every single day. And you will find, your employees swivel chairing between systems, making lots of phone calls, heavy reliance on emails, use of SharePoint and Excel spreadsheets, and all of this kind of stuff to get your stuff done every single day. And guess what? You might say this like, hey, that's digital. Well, it is. But how efficient is that process? How seamless is that process? And also take a look at who are you serving and what kind of response are they expecting from you, right? And some of the places that I see where we're seeing massive opportunities for generative AI are things like contact centers. Think about all the large number of contact centers that governments run, all the way from Medicare services to, the IRS running their contact centers during tax season for, checking on your tax returns, or, you can go down the list. This is one of those key things that governments provide in terms of services, is a single place for citizens to come in and get their questions answered. And yet, we know, all of us know, that when you call one of those help desk, contact centers, well, they're going to ask you a whole bunch of questions to identify who you are. And then guess what? The next time you call them, they're going to ask you the same set of questions again. And you're going to have to repeat your situation every single time, again and again and again. And what we've done with the ServiceNow platform, with the Gen AI integration, is that case management capability, that contact center capability is now fully enabled with Gen AI. So we're capturing and synthesizing information, not just from customer conversations, but, integration to your policies, your eligibility rules, your standard operating procedures, your workflow data, and all of that is now synthesized on the ServiceNow platform. So not only can we now enable greater self-service for citizens, because now they can interact with a conversational chatbot to get things done, but even when they do speak to a human being, well, this person, this agent on the other side is now going to be aided by Gen AI to actually resolve the issue at first contact. And that is the key metric that I think every one of us deserve from government. And that either the deflection rate or the response rates that we get from contact centers is that one key metric that government should be looking at.
I love that description of digital transformation. Get out of the office. I wrote that down. That was wonderful. I have to tell you a story about years ago. There's a digital transformation that took place 25, 30 years ago. So I remember going to someone's office. He was an older guy, and every morning he'd have his secretary print out his email, and he'd read it on his desk and hand it back to her. I mean, he was staying in his office. He didn't jump into the fray, did he? You're saying the exact same thing in 2024. Don't print out your email, jump in and try something and make a mistake. Yeah, Raj made a mistake. So what? He's going to make more, but you got to jump in and try it. And that's I think it's the best takeaway from this interview.
Here's another easy one, John, right? So this is another one I tell our customers all the time. And this is very easy to do. All you got to do is go ask your forms manager in your agency to tell you what are the top 10 downloaded forms in your agency. Okay? Get a hold of those forms. And then the next question you're going to ask your staff is to go draw up the process behind the form and look at how manual it is. How many people are going through that form? How many people are editing it? How many people are signing it, copying it, faxing it, scanning it, emailing it? And I am telling you, if you don't get a headache by the end of the day doing that, you're doing something wrong. So tremendous opportunities, and this is how governments have run for a long time, is that forms culture, is data input, it's data re-entry into multiple systems, and, all of this manual efforts into dashboarding and PowerPointing, and all of that has gotten as well this far. I think it's just not going to serve, the citizens of tomorrow.
Yeah, great. Well, you talked about forms, FORMS. Let's put a letter in there and talk about a forum. Let's talk about your federal forum. So you guys just had a federal forum in March, and people could have walked up to you and grabbed you by the tie and asked you questions. So what are the takeaways from the federal forum? Because you got a lot of interaction with govies there too. So what are the takeaways from that one?
John, 2,300 of our customers
Ooh.
and partners at the event. And then when you include everybody else that attended, over 3,000 people. It's the largest event that we've had for the public sector at ServiceNow ever in our history. And that grew about 40 to 50% from the event last year. We thought last year was big. We moved into a whole new venue, a much larger venue. And it turned out we maxed this one out too. So I don't know where we're going next. I know it's not Las Vegas. Well, we're going to Las Vegas for knowledge. But this is about, serving our customers where they need us most here in the DC area. And I can tell you the excitement is real. Every one of our customers that came there wanted to share their use cases, their success stories, and they wanted to collaborate with other government officials from different other agencies. And to me, that is one of the biggest things that come out of these sessions and these forums is that government collaboration. I've done that extensively in my role as a public servant. I gained from it, right? The lessons learned, the best practices that you can share with your peers in government is just something invaluable. And for us at ServiceNow, truly great opportunity for us to bring our customers together.
I'm taking notes here. And what you literally said is, we went to Las Vegas for knowledge. It's like, wait a minute, you don't go to Las Vegas for knowledge, you go for gambling or drinking or something, but we're talking about capital K. So knowledge 2024. The listeners don't want to get too confused on that. So tell about capital K knowledge 2024. What's that anyway?
Knowledge 2024.
Yeah. Hey, it's capital K.
Knowledge 2024 is our annual event. It's our customer event conference and held in Las Vegas. And I know that's not the best for our government officials to go to. And this is the reason why we're now bringing more events to our customers where they are, and Washington, D.C. being one of them. And by the way, last year we did our first big event, similar event in London for our UK public sector team. I will be in Canberra next month for our first Australian federal forum, supporting our ANZ market there. And we're now seeing this everywhere around the world where, our government customers love to have this interaction, talk with each other and talk to us. And so tremendous opportunities for us to bring industry and government together.
That's why I jump in here. If you're listening to this, you can go to servicenow.com and get more information on it. And I will include all the URLs for this event in the show notes for this particular podcast. So I just want to, and people listen to podcasts in their car and they're on trains and they get on and off. And so, don't worry, don't have to write it down. We'll have a link in the show notes there. So sounds like you're really reaching out and trying to walk into the audience and say, hey, what's your problem there, DOT? What's your problem there, DOI? I mean, you're jumping into the pool, the federal pool.
Well, it's more than that, John, because, so we know what the expectations are, from Congress, from the executive office of the president, right? There are clearly policies, priorities that the administration has established. And a lot of times where we see the opportunity is, how do we make those priorities much more digital, right? So, for example, we know that the Infrastructure Act that, President Biden passed, put, trillions of dollars of money in front of agencies to go modernize infrastructure, here in the United States. And yet, when we look at, how much money has actually been committed, from that budget towards modernization priorities, it's only a fraction of that. And one of the things I hear from our most senior customers here in the US federal market is they just don't know how to, digitally transform their organizations, especially in the context of these big policy changes and key priorities coming from the administration. And if you do not make that jump into getting them more digitally enabled, guess what's going to happen? The status quo is you're going to see a lot more forms. And that's not how you want to do business. And so what we're really trying to do is to really show the art of the possible to our customers, get them to reimagine how governments need to run. How do they need to operate? And how can they become much more digitally savvy in terms of responding to their constituents' needs?
And so generative AI can bring good things and bad things, I mean, it has to be approached very, very carefully. I mean, I was in a classroom last night. All my students joke about, they go to ChatGPT and they find out that Napoleon was part of the American Civil War. Oh, I mean, they're called hallucinations, Raj. And so how do you guard against hallucinations? What's this got to do with technology? Well, maybe it does. So how do you guard against that?
John, I mean, so again, so think about this. So the technology that we know that we all use, whether it's ChatGPT or whatever it is, these large language models were trained over years with all of the public information in the open internet, right? And we know over the last few years, what's happened is there's been so much misinformation and disinformation in the public world that now you get your AI to learn from misinformation. Guess what? Now you're going to have what's called hallucination, right?
Yep.
And so that is one of those key challenges. Now I can tell you, where we're headed as a company is, yes, we do allow our customers to leverage ChatGPT and OpenAI and any other large language model. But what we're finding is for enterprise customers, and especially those in the public sector, they're asking for models, large language models that are domain specific and relevant to their business, right? It's one thing to take a bunch of content and synthesize it into a single paragraph, or ask ChatGPT to write you a nice flowery essay, on the topic of your choice. But guess where the real power of Gen AI is that we talked about earlier? It's actually solving those citizen problems, right? Addressing those needs. And so when you have somebody that's calling into your contact center and they're interacting with a chatbot, what we want the chatbot to do is to actually present them real accurate results based upon data that's trained on the agency's standard operating procedures, eligibility rules, access to the citizen data, and synthesizing all of that and giving you something that's much more actionable and a lot more accurate. Now, will it ever be 100% accurate? Probably never. And the reason for that is because we know the enterprises have bad data too. It's not just bad data outside in the open world. We know government agencies have bad data. But I can tell you that the hallucination effects is going to be considerably lower, when you use domain-specific LLMs like the ones that we have on the ServiceNow platform. And this is where we really differentiated ourselves from everybody else in the business, is we're going to stay focused on delivering these very powerful, impactful models that are being trained with NVIDIA's hardware chips that are fully embedded and integrated into our cloud infrastructure. And even more importantly, none of the customer data ever leaves their instance of ServiceNow. So if you're worried about, hey, my data going out in the public world, and which is a very, reasonable expectation, when you're using OpenAI or other solutions, with the solutions that we have in ServiceNow, your data stays inside your instance and it comes with the data privacy that you should expect.
Right. And I think that's what's key. I think we're at they talk about a software maturity level. I think we're at a maturity level where, hey, I've been dazzled by this and it sounds fascinating and oh boy, this is great. But now let's put it in work boots and you have to be very, very careful about that library there. You have to be very careful what's in it, and it's going to change, and you have to make sure it's labeled correctly and any of the changes take place are accurate. So it's I think you can go to conferences and really get dazzled. Whoa. But then the reality is, you have to be more prudent or judicious about what libraries you use. You can't use anything and dazzle whatever. And in the classroom, the way I get around it is we have 6 graduate students, we sit in a circle, go back and forth and talk about a book. Oh yeah? I can AI that, buddy. You got to go face to face. And so there's ways around it. And I think one way is to have a platform that is vetted, especially for someone like you you've dealt with some classified information in the past, Raj, haven't you?
Oh,
that's we're not going to talk about it,
but here's let me take the opportunity to say that one of our very first customers of generative AI in the ServiceNow platform was a 3-letter intelligence agency. Okay, so that should tell your listeners that the level of maturity and the security that's built into the ServiceNow platform was convincing enough that we had a 3-letter intel agency actually adopt our solution. Now, I leave it up to your listeners' imagination to think about what all they might use generative AI for as an intelligence analyst. But I can imagine a few that's going to be a game changer in terms of, being able to highlight, risks and threats and security and, potential security incidents that might be happening, especially when you're looking at so much raw data that's coming from everywhere. Now, can you do that without AI? Well, yes, our intelligence analysts have done it in the past for many, many years. But with the exponential growth in data that's coming in right now into the Intel community, it's an absolute must-have. So again, security of the architecture, absolutely critical to ensuring, application of Gen AI in the mission space.
Well, I was going to end this interview. I'm going to make a prediction and you're going to make a prediction, okay? So my prediction is that the three-letter agency is not the FDA. And you make a prediction about what's going to happen at Knowledge 2020. Can you hint? Can you imply anything? Are you going to run through the floor throwing confetti or something? Or just a little hint?
Massive announcements at Knowledge, John. So first is the fact that, we are announcing a huge partnership with Microsoft. And not only is Microsoft a customer of ours, but the integration with GenAI, the Copilot into the ServiceNow platform. We already have the Teams integration into the ServiceNow platform. So you're going to start to see greater Microsoft integration. We're also now starting to run our ServiceNow platform on Azure in many regulated markets all around the world. So whether it's in Singapore or whether it's in Australia, whether it's in the European Union, or even here in the United States for the National Security Cloud supporting DoD, our partnership with Microsoft is something that's a key enabler for governments to leverage our platform. And the biggest excitement is, even though we did release generative AI into our commercial cloud last year, we're finally now bringing it into our government community cloud, the GCC FedRAMP instance of ServiceNow, starting here this summer. And so that is the big news. So every government agency, and by the way, that's about 730 agencies that are using our ServiceNow platform in GCC right now, they all have now access to the Gen AI capability that everybody else has.
That's wonderful. Unfortunately, we're going to have to end the interview now. You have been listening to the Federal Tech Podcast with John Gilroy. My name is John Gilroy, and our guest today is Raj Iyer, Head of Public Sector at ServiceNow. Thanks, Raj.
Thank you, John.
Thanks for listening to the Federal Tech Podcast. If you like the Federal Tech Podcast, please support us by giving us a rating and review on Apple Podcast.